So, a lot of you have been asking what happened with my oldest daughter, who is now 14. When she was 12, I ended up having to take her out of school for being bullied because she attempted to take her own life. Long story short, she had been really good friends with this little girl. And at the time, I worked out of town, so the little girl lived with her grandmother, and her grandmother would pick my oldest daughter up from school and take her to her house, while my other two daughters went to after school, so I didn't have to pay anything for that. And so she would go over to her house and spend time. And I really liked the little girl. She came over to spend the night a couple of times. It wasn't until this all started in 6th grade, and then I started noticing that they were arguing a lot, and I realized that the little girl didn't really have a whole lot of supervision. Her grandmother would actually take my 12-year-old and her 12-year-old granddaughter and drop them off at a shopping mall near them, which is in our area, and just leave them and not go pick them up until after I was on my way to get her. There were many times I'd be there waiting, and they'd come pulling up in the car, and I'd be like, "Where have y'all been?" And they said Alamance Crossing. Well, one day I happened to show up early, and I realized this woman was not supervising my kid. She was just dumping my kid and her granddaughter off to go do what God knows what whenever the hell they wanted to. So that pissed me off. My daughter's grade started slipping. She went from a straight A student, National Honor Society member, to barely passing 6th grade, 7th grade. So her dad and I had a discussion, and we made the decision to end their friendship because she was starting to act out a lot. She was starting to have a lot of problems, and the little girl had started picking on her quite a bit. Well, basically, this little girl teamed up with another little girl in the school, and they created a little clique, and it became a bullying campaign against my daughter. She went from a very vivacious, happy, loving, outgoing, social little butterfly to a shell of a person. We had a meeting with the school to let them know that my daughter had been being bullied in 6th grade, and so they moved her into another class away from this child and monitored the situation. Her grades started getting better, that kind of thing. So we were thinking, okay, yes, everything's great, we're doing good. Well, 7th grade come around, and my daughter went back to 7th grade, and this little girl happened to be in her class. Both of them did, actually. And my daughter just kept withdrawing, not even spending time with family, never coming out of her room. And one day, she had gotten in trouble with me and her dad for being ugly to another child in the neighborhood that he lived in. And we didn't really know what all was going on. This child was also picking on her, and she was just fighting back. But some of the things she said to this little girl was really bad. And we came home that night after having a family meeting with her. I went to his house. The girls were with me, and we sat down as a family, and we had a talk and let her know that she was going to be grounded and this kind of thing. Well, I took her phone because I pay for it. And I told him I was going to go through her phone that night. Back then, I was a very laid-back parent. I didn't really monitor her phone very much until I realized what was going on. Well, about 30 minutes after we got home, her dad called me, and he was like, "Where is she?" And I'm like, "She's in the shower. We just got home, you know." And he was like, "You need to go check on her." And I'm like, "She's in the shower." That was the worst day of my life. When I walked in the bathroom, and I have a little bitty bathroom, I only have one bathroom, there was blood all over the floor. And I was on the phone with him, and I was like, "Oh my God, there's blood." And he's like, "Pull back the curtain." And I was afraid to, and I did. And she was standing there holding her wrist, bleeding really bad. So I yelled at him to meet me at the hospital, and he's a firefighter and an EMT, and he's like, "Call the ambulance." And I'm like, "They're not going to get here in time." So I threw her in the car half naked with a robe on. I grabbed her two little sisters, and on the way to the hospital, it took me 5 minutes to get there. I called my parents, and they came from 30 minutes away so that they could get my other two children. And it wasn't until that point that we realized that these children were telling my daughter to kill herself on a daily basis. And it had gotten to the point where no matter how much we advocated at the school for her, it only got worse. Nothing got better. So that's what started our journey in homeschooling her. She has been through over a year of counseling. She's doing a lot better. The scars are still there, and it's really hard for me some days. Like, we went to the lake this weekend, and, you know, I see the scars. I know people see the scars. I know they're curious. They want to know. She usually wears cuffs around her, like cuff bracelets around her wrists so you can't see. But she also had scars on her legs. And as a parent, that is the worst day of a parent's life. To know that your child is reaching for help so much, and you're doing everything you can to help them, thinking that you're actually making an impact, only to find out that you're only making things worse. So I am a huge advocate against bullying. I don't tolerate bullying with children. I don't tolerate bullying with adults, because until you've been in my shoes and you've walked into a bathroom full of blood, and you've watched your child bleeding in a shower and having to rush them to the hospital, not knowing if you're going to get there in time, and then waiting in the waiting room for hours, wondering if she's okay, you will never understand the impact that words can have on people, that physical abuse can have on people. So she will be in the 9th grade this year. She is asked to go back to high school. The child that was the bully has moved to a different school district, and so we don't have to worry about her. My concern, however, is because she has been homeschooled for over a year, even though she still has really close friends that she talks to, I'm worried that people knowing what happened is going to cause another episode, because it took us a long time before we ever saw a smile, over a year. And she's finally at a point now where she will finally laugh again. She finally has gotten her sense of humor back and her life. And I am terrified that something else is going to happen to upset all the work that we have done. But I know that as a parent, I can't keep her sheltered forever. All I can do is watch for the signs and hope that this goes smoothly for her. But guys, you know, as a parent who has been there, if your kid is withdrawing or they're acting like there's something wrong, they're changing the way they used to be in a negative way, they're not talking, they're not hanging out with anybody, you need to monitor them closely. My child learned how to cut herself at school during school times. She had been self-harming for months before this episode happened, and we had no clue at all, because she would hide the evidence. And to this day, she has scars from her shoulder all the way down to her wrist and on her legs. And she always wore long sleeves and pants, so we didn't know. We didn't know at all. And you have to be vigilant for your children. You have to be there for your children. You can't be a parent and ignore the signs. You can't be a parent and expect your child to come to you, because there are times when they feel so overwhelmed that nobody can help them, that the only way they see out is to leave this world. I'm very thankful that my daughter was given a second chance and that she has grown so much from this experience. But every day on social media, I see children being bullied, adults being bullied. If y'all only knew the suicide rate because of being bullied, I've done a lot of papers on it. I'm a psychology major, and when I do papers, that's what I focus on. It is unreal the amount of children and the amount of adults who commit suicide because of bullying. It's higher than drug addiction. It's higher than people who have lost their jobs and have monetary financial issues. Bullying is the #1 cause of suicide in the United States. So please learn from my experience and talk to your children about bullying. Make sure that they understand it's not okay. And if they're being bullied, they need to speak up. If they see someone being bullied, they don't need to follow the crowd. They need to speak up, because now it's getting to a point where they are starting to pass laws that bystanders, which are people who are watching bullying take place, if a child is hurt or a child commits suicide, those bystanders who have either joined in or stood by and watched are also catching charges. And it's not being tolerated. It's still very rampant in the school system because the schools don't really know how to handle it. But the laws, they're getting tight. And, you know, we had already taken papers out on this little girl. She had already gotten in trouble with the law over harassing my daughter and telling her she was going to beat her ass and she wished that she would die. And even that didn't stop her. She only got worse. So please talk to your children. Please, please be there for your children. And if you're an adult and you're a bully, you need to look in the mirror and think about how you would feel if the tables were turned. Because I can promise you, no parent wants to be the parent that I was that night. No parent wants to see what I saw. And no parent wants to deal with what I had to deal with, not knowing how to help. Because it didn't just affect me or her dad or her. It affected her sisters. Her sisters saw the blood. Her sisters knew something was wrong. It affects everybody around a person who tries to commit suicide. It affects everybody around a person who is being bullied. So please, please talk to your children.